Oh, hey YouTube, how are you? Good news. I have a new bodybuilding video for you. Hey guys, what's up? It's the Tominator. Back again with my best pose series. This time we're going to be talking about the best side tricep pose of all time. So once again, no particular order. At the end, I'll give you my top overall pick, and let's get into it. First up, we got this guy, Bill Pearl. Haven't featured him yet, but he's actually before Arnold's time even. He was competing back in the 50s, 60s, and he retired in the early 70s. So you can kind of tell based on his relatively high body fat percentage for a bodybuilder anyway. He looks great by normal standards, but not very shredded for bodybuilders, but still amazing. You can see really good mass on that tricep. Probably the first guy, at least that I can think of, to really nail this pose and hit it well. So that's Bill Pearl. Believe it or not, when he was competing in, I think his debut was 53, and as I read on Wikipedia, he competed against Sean Connery, the actor, and I double-checked that link, and sure enough, it took me to, Sean Connery, the James Bond. So that guy was dabbling in bodybuilding earlier before he got into acting, I guess. Pretty interesting fact. We got Arnold, of course. Arnold, not really known for his triceps so much as for his amazing biceps, but he still looks really good in this pose for an old school bodybuilder. The midsection, the overall aesthetics is what really pulls it off for him, as you can see by this picture right here. And this one earlier in his career, pretty young here as you can tell by his face. And the arm looks huge. He looks good in the pose. This guy looks even better in my opinion, Serge Bray. And I don't know why people are always harping about Frank Zane being the master of aesthetics, because to me Serge is even better. He's got a little more mass, he's got more roundness to his muscle bellies. He's just like like the forerunner of Flex Wheeler in a lot of ways. So perfect aesthetics. I like how he can actually clasp his wrist there. A lot of modern bodybuilders can't seem to do this anymore. They're just too big, they can't reach, they don't have the flexibility, I guess. But yeah, Serge looking like a freaking god here. Frank Zane's got nothing on this. We got Casey Viator, and this guy was known for his forearm development, but he also looks really solid in the side tricep pose, as you can see here. And he was competing, I believe, into the 80s, so he might have been actually around Arnold's time, if not a little after. We got Mike Menser, and he's got some pretty beefy tries there, and look at the abs too. So that's why he's included in the list. And we do have Frank Zane as well, and Frank's looking, his arms look really huge for him here. Not really accustomed to that, but he was a master poser. He was always really good at showcasing his physique to the fullest. And that's what he's doing there. And here he is posing in a park or a college campus or some shit, who knows, but looking amazing. Very statuesque, as always. We got this guy, and I'm like, what the fuck? Is this photoshopped? No, I don't think so. This is Libor Minarak, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He looks like he would have been competing even before Arnold's time, but you Google his name and you can see videos of him competing in the 80s. So he was competing at least up until 86. He looks like before the 80s, but nonetheless, look at the massive tricep on the guy, and it's not, you can see it here again, it looks ridiculous. It's not so much that his arms are really that huge, he's just pushing it into his lat, guys. So that's what's really, he's at a relatively high body fat percentage for a bodybuilder. He's still pretty ripped, but not by bodybuilding standards, not by modern bodybuilding standards, okay? So he's got some fat, he's got some water, and he's able to kind of push his arms into his lats to really make them flare out and flatten out a little bit more to make them look bigger than they really are. So that's what he's doing. But yeah, he does have a pretty beefy tricep. There's no doubt about that. But it really comes down to the way he's hitting the pose. That's kind of just a trick. And we got Albert Beckles looking awesome, really sharp in this pose. Notice how he's clasping the wrist there. I love how these old school guys can actually, have normal flexibility. They can probably actually wipe their own ass, unlike some of the masked monsters of today. And there he is again. So that's why he makes the list. We got Samir Banu. And the line of Lebanon, is one of my favorite old school bodybuilders. Probably my favorite guy from the 80s, actually, the more I think about it. Because he just looks so impressive, especially from the back poses, but even in like side chest, side tricep, he's got a number of aesthetic poses I've seen him nail. So you can see him here in the hotel lobby in this half natty lighting. And look at the midsection, man, on point. We got this guy, Ron Matz. Wasn't able to find too much about this guy. There's not a lot of pictures of him floating around out there, but he makes the list on this one alone. You can tell he's a taller guy, but look at the proportions. Look at the size of the arm. He looks amazing here. We got Frances Benfato, and I almost missed this guy, and oh my god, I'm really glad I went back and checked him out because he definitely makes the list. He looks awesome in this pose. He looks kind of like that, you know, the dude from, what's that movie, Beauty and the Beast, with that pointy-ass chin? He looks like him here. Because he's a good-looking guy. He's got that chin that looks like it can cut butter, and I love the way he hits the pose, how he really pulls his arm back like that. It stretches out the delt, and you can see more striations in the front delt there. So he really puts a unique twist on the pose, very iconic. I really like the way he hits it. So that's why I got so many pictures of him. Here he is really pulling his arm back, and you can see it's just very unusual. But I love the way he hits it. It looks great. Look at the midsection, too. You really got to have a tight waistline to be able to pull this type of pose off. Guys today, they can't afford to do shit like this, or you'd just see this massive, pregnant belly bulging out. But this dude, you talk about old school mass monster. This is Bertil Fox. Look at the size of the guy's arm. He's doing this same kind of thing that Libor was doing, but he's also got the bicep involved now. So make no mistake about it, his arm is huge, but he's making it look even bigger than it is by smushing it into his torso here. And sorry about the blurry quality on this one, but you can still catch what a great side tricep pose this is. So that's why he's on the list. We got Lee Haney, the guy who prevented Bertil from ever winning a Mr. Olympia. And not his strongest pose, that's for sure, but I would say that Haney's much better in both the front and back double bicep, both the front and back lat spread, maybe probably even the side chest. But Haney's just solid in pretty much every pose, so he looks good here, as you can see. Not a lot of pictures of him floating around in this pose, though, so let's move on to Mohammed Makawi. Oh, God, I'm probably butchering that name. I don't know how to pronounce it. I've only seen it written, but he was a shorter guy, and he looks great in this pose. Look at the midsection. Amazing. I think he was only around 5'2" or something like that. He was really short. He was a giant killer, so let me know in the comments below if you know his exact height. Another giant killer in Lee Labrada. Just looking solid throughout here. Good conditioning, very granite-like muscle. That must be him as a kid with that dirty Sanchez stash he's got there. Looks like a freaking young pedophile. Man, it's bad, but looks pretty good on the right, though. We got Thierry Pastel, guy from the 80s. I think he might have competed into the 90s, but look at his arm. He looks amazing in this pose, and the midsection, too, really tight. A lot of the old school guys look awesome in this pose because they have these massive arms, yet they have, coupled with a really tight midsection, which you just don't see these days. And there he is again. That's actually Lee Priest on the left. I didn't even recognize him at first because he doesn't have his trademark blonde hair, but that is Lee. And here he is again, and I almost didn't include him on the list, believe it or not, because yes, he does have arguably the best arms ever, right? So, duh, he's a shoo-in for the list. But I wasn't able to find a lot of good photos of him at first in this pose, so I almost didn't put him on here, but thankfully I went back and I was able to find some like this here. Look at the balloonish bicep here. Not often you see that in the side tricep. It's usually about the tricep, but for Lee, man, he's even making it about the bicep. And look at the 8-pack. Awesome abs. Even when this is pretty recent because he got those face tattoos and everything, so I'm pretty sure he only got those in the last 5 or so years, so he's got to be at least 40 here. He's pretty old, and he looks amazing. Awesome genetics for this guy. And this is technically more like a side relaxed pose than a side tricep, but I had to include it nonetheless because look at the midsection, look at the proportions, the shape, everything is perfect. So this is the first one I came across of Lee. Not the best version for him. Because, yes, the arm and the shoulder looks great, but the chest looks weak. The abs aren't flexed. The rest is kind of crap, other than the arm and the shoulder. His hair looks kind of like that dude from Street Fighter, though. You guys know who I'm talking about, right? But Shawn Ray on the left, though, looks even better. Look at the midsection on him. The arm looks amazing. And this is a world-class Hall of Fame bodybuilding photo right here. I mean, the midsection, man, the chest, everything is perfect. God damn, man. And this is one of his strongest poses. Ray looks good in so many poses, but I was able to find quite a few pictures of him looking outstanding in the side tricep, as you can see from all these shots here. And for me, like, it's not even all about the arm with Ray. It's more about his perfect midsection. I don't think there's another guy in the history of the sport with a better midsection than him overall. When you include like the intercostals, the serratus, however you pronounce that, the obliques, and perfectly symmetrical abs. I don't know what those glasses are about, but he still looks awesome in this pic here. And once again, the arm looks huge. Just a real standout pose for Ray. Here he is next to Dorian, the man who prevented him from ever fulfilling his dream of becoming Mr. Olympia on 2 separate occasions. Then we got Flex on the right doing his thing. Awesome photo right here. And speaking of Flex, here he is again. And yeah, once again, another guy kind of like Serge Nubret before him. Just perfect aesthetics. Amazing shape, full muscle bellies. And look at the horseshoe on the guy. Even when he got bigger, he looked still aesthetic and awesome. Here he is next to Ronnie Coleman and Chris Cormier looking pretty solid. Ronnie didn't make the list, guys, because for me, this is one of Ronnie's weakest poses. The only other pose that is worse than this for him is the ab and thigh, I think. But as you can see from this side tricep, his triceps are a little high. They don't really look that good in this position. They look great in other poses like the front and back double bicep, but not in the side tricep so much. And his midsection doesn't look good, quite frankly. This is usually what it looks like in this pose for him. It's just kind of bloated and lacking definition, and it's just not a strong pose for Ronnie. But we got Cormier. Cormier makes the list because of photos like this. He looks pretty solid. Couldn't find a lot of him, though. There he is on the right, pulling off a Flex Wheeler impersonation, looks like. And we got Craig Titus in the middle. I'm sure Craig, I could have found, I'm sure there's other photos of him looking amazing because I've seen awesome stuff from him in the triceps department. Like, on par with guys like Roelly and Phil. Okay? So I have no doubt this guy back in the day could really nail this pose, but I couldn't find any other pictures other than this one where he was. That's Melvin Anthony on the left. Looking pretty good for Melvin. Pretty sharp because he's known to often not come in very conditioned. But let's move on to some of the heavy hitters like Levrone. And no, I didn't give Levrone the win in this pose. You could easily make an argument for him winning it because, let's face it, he's got arguably the best triceps ever. Same with the delts, and that's probably the 2 most standout body parts for this pose, and he's got a great midsection to boot. So yeah, you can make a case for him winning, but for my money, there's at least one other guy who hits it better than him, for sure. So that's why I didn't give Levrone the win, but man, he looks really good in the pose though, right? Here he is crushing Ronnie, which doesn't happen very often for Ronnie to get beat in a mandatory pose, that's for sure. There he is next to Cormier and Nasser on the left, and Levrone's beating both those guys too. And next to Yates and Nasser. And this is a weird photo because in this one photo, man, I would probably give it to Nasser, believe it or not. His midsection looks sharper than Dorian's, and his tricep looks, well, I don't know about the tricep. It's kind of even between him and Dorian, but his bicep looks better. His shoulder looks better. His leg, arguably is a little bit better. More sweep to the quad there. And Levrone, on paper, Levrone should be beating both these guys. It should be Levrone, Dorian, then Nasser. But for this one picture, for my money, it's reversed because Levrone's not really hitting his tricep very well. He's not fully extending or flexing. So he's not really showcasing it to the fullest. But anyway, let's move on. More of Nasser. Beating Yates again. This is the 97 Mr. Olympia when Dorian was at his weakest. And Nasser is out-angling the fuck out of him here. Plus, this is a very unflattering angle for Dorian. So yeah, Nasser's winning this picture here. Aaron Baker pulling off a fruity version of Flex Wheeler's version of this pose. And, he looks good. I don't really like what he's doing with his foot there, but oh well, you go, girl. Do your thing. We got Andreas Munzer. This guy was Mr. Shredded. Look how ripped he is. And the horseshoe, Here he is again, almost the same, but this is different. You can tell, look at the veins here in the far arm, and there's none here, different backgrounds. So this is actually different, even though it looks almost identical. He's a little more shredded here, though. And look at the striations all through the shoulder, the chest, all along the tricep. This guy was known for that. Unfortunately, he ended up paying the ultimate price for that. He fucked around with diuretics and stuff too much, and he died prematurely at a young age because of his drug use, I think. So. But he was awesome back in the day. We got Vince Taylor. Not looking that best through the midsection and the chest maybe, but the arm looks awesome, doesn't it? Really big legs. Wasn't able to find too many pictures of him in this pose, but this one says enough on its own for him to make the list. We got another Taylor, though, and Ernie Taylor, and this one you got to put a huge asterisk next to because the guy was clearly abusing some synthol or oils, some sort of injectable in those triceps, because that's not natural, that's for sure. Those bulges, man, it's weird looking, but he still looks better than both these guys, and he does have really freaky big triceps, so I kind of let him squeak onto the list, but you can make an argument for him not deserving to be here on accounts of cheating or whatnot. So anyway, we got this guy, though. This guy looks amazing. Alex Fedorov. He only competed briefly, I think, but he looks awesome in this pose for a mass monster. Look at the size of the arm. The midsection's relatively tight. I love the way he's hitting it, too. Kind of puts a unique stamp on the pose. No one else really hits it quite like this, as far as I'm aware. And you can see it there. He's really accentuating his tight midsection for a bigger guy and kind of playing up his large legs and his massive arms, right? So he looks great. Here he is beating Ronnie, right? So once again, Ronnie's coming up short in the side tricep comparison. But note the guy on the right, that's Chris Dim. And I mentioned it before in the side chest video that I made about that crazy sweep he's got on the tricep. So I knew he'd look good in this pose, needless to say, because he's got just ridiculous lateral and long head to the tricep there. As you can see with the massive sweep, it looks almost fake. But I'm pretty sure that's all legit muscle, nothing... like what Ernie Taylor's got going on. No oil there. I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this guy's no... Anyway, Jay Cutler. Wow. Jay, you could easily make a case for Jay winning this pose, too. Because he looks awesome here. I don't know if this one's been photoshopped at all. It looks like it might have been, but you can see from all these other photos I'm going to show you here that he looks awesome pretty much every time he hits this pose. His midsection was always really tight. He never had any distension, so that's so commendable for like a guy of his mass level to be able to do that. Never come in with one of those pregnant guts. Always was rocking sharp abs. He always had a wide waist, a blocky waist, but it was never distended. And the tricep looks just absolutely massive here in this pose. Really good separation in the delts too. The chest looks good. I love the way he hits the pose. He just nails it. One of his strongest poses, if not his strongest pose. Okay, so he just crushes this pose every time, and one of the best to ever hit it. Even next to Dorian, looks amazing. You could make an argument either way here. They both look outstanding. Here he is in the 2003 Mr. Olympia, in which Ronnie crushed pretty much everybody in almost every other pose, but Jay's beating him here. And there's Dexter on the right. Dexter didn't make the cut, actually, believe it or not. I was a little surprised about that. But when I looked him up, most pictures, he doesn't even look as sharp as he does here. And you can't really see a lot of separation in the tricep, in the arm there. Which, you would think for a guy nicknamed the Blade, you'd see a little more clear separation and definition than this. So this is actually one of the sharpest pictures I could find of him. He normally doesn't even look this good in the pose. But here we go. We got Mustafa Muhammad on the left, Jay Cutler, Troy Alves, and once again Ernie Taylor on the right. And for my money, man, wow, look at Mustafa Muhammad. He's out Jaying Jay. Because he's hitting it the same way, but he looks even better, as we can see from this close-up right here. His tricep looks sharper, and even bigger, if that's possible. The leg looks sharper, his abs look more dialed in. He just looks better in this one show, so... I wasn't able to find too many pictures of the guy because he's not obviously nearly as famous as Jay. Hasn't competed as much, I don't think, so you can't really say he's outright better than him, but he did look better in that one comparison. He looks really good. You could even make probably an argument for him winning this pose, man. We got him next to Bob Ciccarello there in the center and Chris Paul on the right. What? It looks like the NBA player, Chris Paul, but that's Caprice Murray. And he looks really good in the pose here, too. So we got Johnny Jackson, and with Johnny, this isn't even like a side tricep so much as it is like a side ab, chest, and trap pose, because that's what really stands out to me in this pose with Johnny Jackson, is look at the chest, the fullness there, the abs look amazing, really blocky but well-defined, and then the traps, what can you say about his traps? Probably the best traps of all time on this guy. So the arm is almost like an afterthought, but it holds up enough for him to squeak onto the list for my money. Gustavo Bedell, though, this is one of his strongest poses. Haven't seen the guy yet in any of these other videos, but when he nails the side tricep, he really nails it. Like you can see, it's kind of like a Jay Cutler almost, with even more striated horseshoe shape in his triceps here, because he's packing a lot of mass and he's really nailing the pose, kind of leaning forward a bit like how Jay does. So really strong in that one. Victor Martinez. Looks great here. You can find some pictures of him looking really good in this pose, as long as he's conditioned. He doesn't have the best muscle bellies in the triceps, but, overall, his physique is just really solid from the side. This guy, man, never heard of him before I started doing my research for this video, but Eduardo Correa. And he's got some of the most striated, this is like Andreas Munzer type striations in that tricep there. Probably the most striated triceps of any guy in this video, actually. He looks amazing in this pose. He's certainly not the best bodybuilder, probably the worst bodybuilder in this entire list overall. But in this pose, he's one of the strongest. You can make an argument probably for this guy winning this pose. Because look at if you're all about the striations, look at the detail in his triceps here. That horseshoe is so well defined, it's crazy. He looks awesome in this pose. You got Kai Green, though, another guy with kind of like high triceps, but very striated when he's dialed in. So he really kind of maximizes his potential in this pose because his triceps really are nothing special, especially compared to guys like Phil. Like, look at this right here, how much more meat Phil has on his triceps than Kai. Look at the forearm difference, too, the shoulder. Make no mistake about it, like, Phil's crushing him here, but Kai's, hitting the pose pretty well for what he's got to work with, right? Then we got Phil once again next to Kai and Roelly on the right, and Phil's running away with this pose. If you're just looking at the tricep alone, Roelly might be on his level here. But the rest of the body, Phil is just crushing him in the shoulder department, in the chest department, in the ab department, legs. So no contest really in that show. This is him at the 2010 Arnold. And another guy like Phil, you can make a case for Phil winning this pose. Like, I would have not much to argue with there. This video is really hard to make a decision on. The most difficult one thus far in terms of the mandatory poses. Because, man, there's just so many guys who look so good in this pose. It was hard to make a decision. So there he is, Phil, a little bit younger in his career, and you can see how much more like defined his arm looks. He kind of put on more mass here in 2013, but he lost a little bit of definition. Though he looks like a monster here. The arm is just awesome looking. Here he is in the 2008 Ironman. Really good lighting in this show, and Phil's looking like a boss once again. It's a really strong pose for him. Roelly Winkler, though, Roelly, for my money, has even better triceps than Phil. I know I said earlier in that comparison that we saw just a couple photos ago that Phil was running away with it, but Roelly wasn't as big as he's gotten now, and his triceps are just probably the best ever. Let's face it. And he's smart to draw attention to his arms in this pose, because he doesn't really have, the rest of his body's not really that great. But as you can see right here, he's making it all about the tricep. He's milking that shit. And smart for him to do that, because no one else can hang with this, okay? So that's why he's making the list. He's a shoo-in, right? Like, look at the thickness of his arms there. The far arm, you can tell the thickness through the bicep. The forearm even. The near arm, he's got that ridiculous striated horseshoe. Probably like the biggest, most of all like the striated defined horseshoes, that's got to be the most meaty, the biggest one, right? We got Cedric McMillan though, and he reminds me a little bit of Sergeant Bray actually in this pose, because it doesn't really look like he's flexing that hard, But he's a taller guy, very shapely and full and aesthetic, just like Serge Nubret before him. So Cedric makes the list, of course. Here he is next to Steve Kuklo, and I don't even know. I don't think that's Juan Morel, is it? Can't tell. But Cedric's winning this pose, I think. I like Steve's shoulder in this shot here, though. But I was expecting Steve maybe to crack this list, but not quite. He just didn't do it for me. We got Big Ramy, though. Big Ramy cracks the list because this is one of his better poses, I think. He's got such massive arms. He kind of hits it a little bit like Jay, actually. So he's a more massive guy. So smart to tailor it after probably the biggest guy to really nail the pose well in Jay Cutler. If that's what he was trying to do, I'm not sure if that was conscious or not. But look at the mass on his arm. And so well defined and developed. Even when the rest of him's not that well conditioned, he still looks amazing. We got this guy, Justin Compton. And talk about really good arm genetics. You can see that right here. It's like Phil Heath-esque. His tricep looks very reminiscent of Phil's here in this pose. So that's why he cracks the list. William Bonac. And this guy reminds me a lot of Lee Priest right here because you can see that crazy like round bulge of his bicep right there. He's making it it's like a side bicep and tricep, right? Just like Lee was doing. Really good muscle bellies on the dude. I think he looks even better here. This would have been 2014, I can tell by the backdrop, because he looks a little bit more dialed in here than he did in the last photo. We got Dorian, though, and man, this guy is just shockingly good in this pose, because let's face it, his arms kind of suck. Like, to be quite frank, guys, they just do. They're just not very big. They're undersized for his body, and he tore his bicep and stuff. He doesn't have the best shape here, as you can tell by that tricep. His horseshoe looks a little bit fucked up, but he really just nails this pose and knocks it out of the park. I'm not even sure how. I'm not sure if he really, really worked on his posing to maximize his potential in it, or if he's just well structurally suited for this pose for whatever reason, but he really crushes it. It's one of his strongest poses, which is shocking to me because, like I said, his arms aren't very good, his shoulders aren't very good. Like, genetically speaking, these are not strong body parts for Yates. He's like much better in the back department, obviously, even in the legs and the calves and forearms and stuff, as opposed to the triceps and the shoulders, which is what this pose is mostly about. But, I mean, he's just nailing the pose, and you can make an argument for Yates winning, for sure. For sure, but I don't quite have him there. He's in the top 5, for sure. But I wouldn't say he's number 1 overall, okay? Even though he looks amazing in this pose, there's another guy in Paul DeMaio who I feel like this is the number 1. It was a really tough decision. And at the end of the day, you could go with like half a dozen different guys and make a solid case for any of them. Like, you could give it to Jay. You could give it to Dorian, you could give it to Phil, you could give it to Roelly. If you like the old school guys, you could give it to Ben Fado maybe, or that Libor dude. Like, there's so many guys who look so good in this pose, but for my money, Paul DeMaio just is kind of, he just kind of edges them out. Like, this is the guy who, in this picture right here, this is, to me, is the most impressive picture of any guy hitting the side tricep pose that we've seen. So that's why I'm giving it to Paul DeMaio. They called him Quadzilla because of his crazy leg and quad development, but they could have easily called him Trizilla because look at those triceps. Just ridiculous. This looks almost like Mike Matarazzo in terms of just a freaky arm size, and let's face it, not the best conditioning, kind of a flat chest here. But he's just nailing the pose, man. Like, he really brings his arms out to their max. It's kind of like what Libor was doing earlier in terms of like smushing it up against his lat to make it appear bigger than it is, but the difference with Paul is that he's even more dialed in and he's more muscular, so it looks even better on him. And to me, like, the side tricep pose, we're talking about the tricep, right? So this is the most impressive tricep I've seen of any guy in this pose. You can make an argument maybe for Roelly too, but man, this just looks ridiculous in terms of the proportion, the shape, and everything. So that's why I'm giving it to Paul DeMaio. Very controversial decision, I know, so let me know in the comments if you agree. Let me know if you think it's someone else. Please let me know if I missed anybody, as always. And until next time, I'm the Tominator signing off. Next time, we're going to be taking a look at the best ab and thigh pose. But until then, thanks for watching. I'll be back.